Art Loft is brought to you by
Where there is freedom, there is expression. The Florida Keys and Key West.
the Miami-Dade County Tourist Development Council, the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Cultural Affairs Council, the Miami-Dade County Mayor, and the Board of County Commissioners, and the Friends of South Florida PBS.
Art Loft. It's the pulse of what's happening in our own backyard, as well as a taste of the arts across the United States.
To see life become a part of my artwork.
In this episode, travel to the Florida Keys, where nature has a way of sparking these artists' creativity.
The Keys are unique in their light. The light is very different here. It's very ultraviolet light, and that's an inspiration.
And while the road to the Keys seems straightforward, when it comes to art, there are tons of twists and turns you can make. We'll travel to an underwater art gallery, create puns on the potter's wheel, hand-shape leather masks, and more.
My name is Caroline Geyer, and I'm a leather worker who specializes in making theatrical costume leather masks, and I live in beautiful Key Largo, Florida, in the Florida Keys. It was clear from the beginning that whatever kind of creative, artistic aesthetic is in my head translates well into a leather mask. I love studying the animal faces. You know, I like looking at animals, so I'm happy to study them and see if I can make a mask. And at the same time, that is what people seem to want more and more of. I'll never forget a customer asking me to do a rabbit and, you know, struggling with it at first, trying to figure out how to do these animal faces. And I did the rabbit and people loved it. There seems to be like a creepy rabbit mask thing that's almost like a modern archetypal collective unconscious kind of thing, where people really respond to creepy white rabbit masks over and over again, regardless of what movie they've been in. They're in movies again and again and again. So I find that is something that kind of persists year after year. And then, of course, wolves are always popular, and then I'll have people that'll be like, oh, can you do one of my dog? I have people who wear them, people who hang them on the walls, and then people who do both. We'll just leave them on the wall until they have a masquerade event to go to. But I certainly sell to people who are only gonna wear them and people who are only gonna hang them on the wall. I create the masks entirely by hand. If I have an idea of a mask that I want to make and I don't have a pattern yet for it, and over 20 years I've got hundreds of patterns, I'll research the design and create a pattern. And then I trace that onto the piece of leather, cut it out with a blade, and then I wet that piece of leather, blot it dry, and then I wait until the leather gets to just the right point for it to be molded. And that varies from piece of leather to piece of leather, and also depending on the humidity in the air, stuff like that. When the leather is at the right point to be molded, I sit there and I mold it all by hand. And then I set that on the floor or on a towel or something, let it dry overnight. Most masks I'll do an airbrush base, so I go outside and I airbrush the base on. And then after that's dry, I buff it up a little bit and I add some detail hand painting with acrylic paints. And then when that's dry, I brush on an acrylic sealer. And when that's dry, I sand the back so it's comfortable. I add some felt padding if that's needed. Some masks need it, some don't. And then I'll put on ribbon ties or sew on elastic straps, and then it's ready to go. I work very hard to make them comfortable, and that is one of the hallmarks in my masks. And that is why a lot of the groups, theater groups, dance companies come back again and again for my masks, because you can put them on and almost forget about them, is my goal anyway. And that is one of the nice things about the leather, is they tend to just breathe a little bit more than a synthetic mask. I could just make goat masks all day long. And I have a dream project that I need to do eventually, where I want to do all the different breeds of goats, because there's so many different kinds of goats, and I would love to do a beautiful mask representational of each one. People who buy masks seem to enjoy goat masks. And then it's always fun to do something like a leopard or a mountain lion. If it comes out good, that's the kind of mask where I'm like, ooh, look what I made. That's kind of pretty, just like the animal is.
To see more of Caroline's handcrafted masks, visit her online at etsy.com/shop/Tianova.
I love color. It seems to talk to me when I work. My name is Ruth Gilmore Langs. I'm an abstract painter, and my studio gallery is in Islamorada, Florida. I think that the keys are unique in their light. The light is very different here. It's very ultraviolet light, and that's an inspiration. As an abstract expressionist, I love painting large scale. I love thick paint. All the way. Thicker the better. I use a lot of texture, definitely. I used to be a weaver when I was younger, and I loved the texture in fibers, and I think it's translated into the painting. It's not unnatural for an artist to burst out into abstract painting, because what you're doing is you're losing an image, and it becomes all about shapes and colors. And for me, I see it as a very high form of expression, and extremely challenging, because you're losing the trees and the ocean, and you're trying to emote and communicate through brushstroke, color, paint, energy. In my heart and in my soul, I'm a storyteller. And whatever medium you land on as an artist, it's storytelling. If we're lucky, we get to show. And showing is a completely different thing than painting and working. So suddenly you've been working alone and focusing on your topic, and then you move it into a studio and hopefully have a really big fun party. I pick themes and then I follow them. And that's true for the USA series. I've been following it for 20 years. And one of the things about following a story is it started with 9/11 and the shock of that, the shock the whole country had, the whole world had with that. And then to follow that series into what America is today, there's a story there. And I'm telling it through shapes and color. And what it's saying is going to be everybody's eyes and ears to figure that out. For me, that painting is a victory, because I was trying really hard to express the beauty of America, the rivers, the sunshine, the land, the expansiveness, all the while with the limitation, which isn't that big of a limitation, but I was on a 10.5-foot canvas trying to express our huge nation. The second piece to the USA series, which I started after 9/11, is probably the darkest piece in the series, mostly because it's black and white. It's a repetition of USA and the numbers 11. And as I began repeating the numbers 11, it became obvious to me that that represented the Twin Towers. I myself have come to see the paintings as mirrors, and they're a reflection, and I think they'll offer whatever needs to be offered to each individual person, because we bring ourselves as much as anything to these paintings. They will give out, but you bring yourself, and everybody's going to bring their own history and their own story and their own feelings about America, no matter where you're from in the world. And I think these paintings are an attempt to express it through abstract expressionism. How lucky is that that's my tool.
Living in the Florida Keys has been a big influence on Ruth Gilmore Langs' art. She's also a scuba diver and has a series called Motion, which is inspired by her underwater adventures, painting the colors she sees, the feelings of floating, and her observations of the changing sea. Follow Ruth in her different collections on Instagram at RuthGilmoreLangs_studio.
I love the whimsical sculptures that I work on. I love teapot forms. I like taking play on words and making them into an object. It has some humor to it, makes you think, makes you enjoy it. I'm Lynn Loftus, and I'm a professional potter. I've been working in clay for 45 years. I'm here in Marathon, Florida, in the beautiful Florida Keys. I do a lot of things that are Keys-oriented. I do make a cheeseburger in Pero dice, which is sitting in between two big wheel-thrown dice. And I'm very technically oriented in my work. I do laugh, though, and say I haven't been considered seriously as an artist for years, since people come in and look at my stuff and start laughing. But I am very technically involved in what I do as well. Life is just a bowl of cherries, which is a thrown bowl, and little clay furniture, little chairs inside. Bowl of cherries. I made a one-night stand, which is a little wicker night table with a lamp and ashtray and cocktails on it. Just one-night stand, very whimsical. I do primarily throwing on the potter's wheel. I like a combination of the round pieces with hand build. I do teach a lot more hand building and people on the potter's wheel. After so many years, it's really a joy to be able to share it with other people and see them get the passion for it as well. If you're going to throw on the potter's wheel, you definitely need a wheel. You need your kiln. You can make a lot of the tools that you're using. I sometimes use a potato peeler to get a surface on a pot, a particular pot. Then as you go on, you're going to need your glazes to do the firing of the pieces too, so that they're complete. Basically, you're placing the clay on a wheel, either a kick wheel or an electric wheel. We use electric wheels here, and then actually start with a little bit of speed and muscle to get the clay perfectly centered, and then slow down, and then the finesse and just bringing up the walls of the pot. The beauty of it is, once you start, the clay is reusable. So if you aren't doing good pieces, you can reuse the clay and do it again. So it is good to learn because it's not real expensive to get started. When you're starting with the clay, you're starting with the wet clay. When you make something, whether it's on the wheel or hand building, then you allow it to dry. It can sometimes be a week or so, depends on the dampness of the clay. Once it dries, then you're going to put it in the kiln for the first firing, which is called a bisque firing. When it comes out, it'll be fired. Our clay is white when it comes out of the bisque firing. Then it's absorbent, and that's when you start doing your glazing, applying your colors, and then after that it's fired a second time, and everything comes out with all the pizzazz and the magic. The day you're on the wheel, you're basically creating your canvas for whatever it's going to be. So I cover them in plastic till they're what we call leather hard, because when you're throwing any movements, you're going to move it off. So the next day, when it's like leather, like shoe leather or belt leather hard, that's when you're going to add your embellishments or handles or designs. I define myself as a potter, so it's part of who I am at this point in my life. It's just a joyful medium to work in. Also, I love playing in the mud. I have never outgrown that. This is, like Confucius said, pick a job you love and you never have to work a day in your life. I've been very blessed to pursue a career as a potter.
If you want to start creating pottery, Lynn and the art studio can help. Just call or email to make a reservation, info on their website.
My name is Oricon. I'm the director of the Winter Star Party here at Big Pine Key. An astrophotographer is basically somebody who points a camera to the sky and tracks the sky and takes long exposures. Sometimes these exposures can last over several days. So we might start and take 10-minute exposures and take 100 10-minute exposures in one night and then continue in another night and even a third night. And we'll take all these images and put them together to get a photograph. And the photograph will reveal things you just cannot see with your naked eye looking through a telescope. The light is so dim that it takes hours or even perhaps days to gather all that light to make the image. So you cannot just see it instantly with your eye. When I first got into the hobby, it used to be, let me see how many I can do in one night. And it's the other way around. I would try to do 3 images in one night. But you don't get a good image. You get very grainy, noisy images when you do that. The trick is to do one object over 3 nights. Favorite is the Orion constellation. Where Bellatrix is, the top star, is the head of Alfred Hitchcock. And you'll see an arc which is called Bernard's Loop, that is the stomach. And then you have an arm, a very faint reddish arm, and Betelgeuse is like the cigar that he typically smokes. So that's why we call it the Alfred Hitchcock Nebula. This is Omega Centauri in the Centauri constellation. This is one of the largest globular clusters with millions of stars in it. Don't know exactly how many millions, but there are several million stars in this cluster, all orbiting each other. The neat thing about it, scientists say, is if our solar system was inside that cluster, it would never be dark. There would always be light. It's a very interesting cluster. Everybody loves to come down and see it because it's so big and large. It's the largest one that we get to see. This is a great place to have a star party. We have a lot of people that come down, about 600 astronomers that set up the telescopes on the beaches, because it's one of the southernmost places where you can see objects that are below 67 degrees declination, which basically means we can see certain objects that you just cannot see anywhere else in the continental United States. So because of that, it draws a lot of people down to point their telescopes low in the horizon and see objects such as Eta Carina, which is one of the largest nebulas that are out there. So here at the Winter Star Party, you'll notice that we don't use regular flashlights. We use a red flashlight. And the reason why we use a red flashlight is because your eyes get dark adapted, and it takes roughly 25 minutes for your eyes to be truly adapted to the dark. You are at the mercy of the weather, you're at mercy of the equipment. There's, things go wrong. Even the wires hanging off the scope can cause trailing in the stars because you're following the stars. So the motion of the stars going across the night sky is so smooth and so precise that there's really not much man-made mechanical equipment that can accurately move in the same way. It is a form of art in its own right, in its own way, because different people have different ways of manipulating the data and showing the photograph, or how they do it, or how they image it, and each one is a little bit different.
If you'd like to see more of these celestial photographs and learn more about the Winter Star Party, head to Facebook.
The super cool thing with artwork on the water is that at first it's just photography, but after this, the sea helps me to make these images unique. And I have no influence during these 3 months. My name is Andreas Franke. I'm a photographer and I love diving. I'm very concerned about plastic in the ocean. For my plastic ocean images, I collected real plastic trash from the ocean, from the Mediterranean Sea, very close to Venice, Italy. So 4 of us went down there, collected only 1 hour on the beach, and we had more than enough plastic to do all these 24 images. Then I had a pool, like a tank. I placed girls as well as kids in this plastic and made like a still life, like an old classic still life, and surrounded in the water, in the tank, the plastic pieces we collected around the talents. So the reason why I came to Key West and hang the artwork in Key West on the Vandenberg is, of course, it's an outstanding shipwreck and also a wonderful dive destination. And for me, I really see it as a gallery.
All right, let's bring you down. We're almost done.
We brought them down, all the 24 images, and hang them with magnets on the side of the shipwreck. So during these 3 months, while this exhibition was underwater on the Vandenberg, more than 10,000 divers had the possibility to see this project. After 3 months, I came back and we brought this artwork up. We brought them on land, we clear coat them, that all the sea life gets stable and will not crumble. Now, after these images are clear coated, we will show it again, and we will show it in a gallery. During these 3 months, these images changed, because the good thing of the sea life, become a part of my artwork and converted them. So I do 50%, the other 50% is doing the sea. After these 3 months, when I bring them up, there is a lot of growth of microorganisms, and it changed these images and make them unique. Also, if I would do it a second time, it never ever would look similar. And that is fantastic. And here you can see how the artwork looks before, and here you can see the difference. So what you see here, and why I love this so much, to hang the artwork on the water, it's like the water drips in these images and change the colors and creates frames, like in the old times when we had Polaroids. I call it awareness campaign. And the reason why I came up with this, it's really such one of our biggest problems. And I love the ocean, and I had really the feeling I have to do something. You could cry. You see every year how the sea gets worse and worse, the nature dies, and you find plastic everywhere. But I feel the more often the people hear about this and see this, I hope it will help a little bit.
To see more of the sinking world of Andreas Franke and to check out his plastic ocean photography project, visit his website. There, you can also check out his past underwater galleries on the Vandenberg. Continue the conversation online. Art Loft is on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at ArtLoftSFL. Find full episodes and segments on a brand new website, artloftsfl.org, and on YouTube at South Florida PBS.
Art Loft is brought to you by
Where there is freedom, there is expression. The Florida Keys and Key West.
the Miami-Dade County Tourist Development Council, the Miami-Dade County Department of Cultural Affairs, and the Cultural Affairs Council, the Miami-Dade County Mayor, and the Board of County Commissioners, and the Friends of South Florida PBS.